Hello and welcome to this introductory session for Sprint and Write Fall of 2025. I'm Christina Quinn. I'm the director of CSU Writes, and I'd like to share with you a little bit about the series, what it is, and how you can participate. I'll share some writing momentum techniques. You can use these whether you're participating in the Sprint and Write series or not. These are just great things for you to take with you. I have an AI kind of caveat and just a little bit of information when we're thinking about generative writing for ourselves and the research that we're producing, and then how it is that we might integrate Gen AI into that. Talk a little bit about writing for speed, something called the Roosevelt Dash, and which is just really, really helpful strategy. And then I'll talk about preparing yourself to do sprints, some intensive generative writing sessions. And I'll talk about that in relation to the Sprint and Write series program, but it's just good advice that you could take with you and put in your back pocket and use all the time. So let's talk about the Sprint and Write series. That pulls together some different offerings. First, it's this intro and strategy session, but then there's also two-hour drafting sessions within a couple weeks. So the first one is September 25th, and after that, October 2nd. Notice that there's a week in between, and that gives you some time to regroup, reassess, and prepare for that writing. So we have a couple weeks of preparation that we can do now for our first session. Then we do an intensive 2-hour block of generative writing on an article, and then we have a week in between, and then we come back for another intensive session. At the end of those 4 hours, for most of us, our goal is to have, for attending to create an article or draft article, to have that fully kind of sketched out, drafted out if we can. I know that there have been folks who have been able to do more than one article draft. So it's not been fully drafted completely, but people have made good progress on 1+ articles. But it really depends on your field and how long those articles are and how well steeped you are in the research and what it is that you're writing about. If you aren't able to attend those sessions and you still want to do drafts, we have shorter sprinting sessions on Tuesday mornings. Those are hybrid, and you can attend in either Walnut in person or virtually on Zoom, and they run from 10 to 11:30. So those run through the semester, by the way, into December. So you can have weekly sprints that you prepare for generating new content that then you can go and edit later. We are not the only institution or organization that does writing sprints. They're relatively common. I suspect that a lot of us think that we're sprinting when we are urgently writing to deadline. We'll talk about how that's probably not the case when we look at like what we're talking about with generative writing versus editing in a moment. But you can bring groups of writers together as they did with this Michigan project on how to conduct paper sprints. Their strategy is super helpful. I've also heard rumors that you can do book sprints for a week and produce a draft of an entire book within that time. Let's talk a little bit about using AI in our writing and how that connects to our generation of texts. And I think if we're looking at how it is that the internet changed how we read, Nicholas Carr talks about it as, jet skiing across the surface of texts. I love this kind of image from Penguin on does skimming a book still count as reading? And the answer is yes, and it's a version of reading. But I'm going to make the same kind of claim for generating text with AI. Perhaps you prompt in your ideas and it generates a text for you, but is that really your generated text? And does it count as writing? Well, yeah, it counts as writing. It doesn't necessarily count as your writing, though, and I think that's the key. It's really important for us to make that distinction. And it's also really important for us then to continue to practice our generative writing and our critical lens and editing. And so thinking about when it is that we want to use AI, I'd like for us to be consciously deciding when it is that we are or are not choosing to use it and integrating it into a project. We have Copilot at CSU connected to our Office 365. Many people on campus have been using Grammarly for years before it even included some LLM capacities. So you want to be careful, though, in thinking about what it is that you're asking those programs to do for you and your writing. Are you asking for brainstorming support and kind of Q&A and having just a little bit of a conversation to kind of guide you and thinking about how to arrange your project? Are you asking it to help you rephrase and kind of consider some language choices? Are you using it to summarize large groups of readings and documents so that you can use them in your literature review? Or maybe identifying some structural grammatical issues. Most of these, as far as I know, but I haven't checked, all publishers are allowed. But you want to just check and see, like, how is it that you're using it? And at the output, where is it you're going to be submitting? Is this kind of use allowed? If you are a graduate student, check with your committee. What are your advisors saying? What's your department saying? And make sure that you are in compliance with all of those different groups, because you've got institutional agencies, we've got funders, we've got publishers, we've got others with guidelines on how it is that we use AI in our research writing, and we want to make sure that we are not using it improperly, right? And so I think that developing an internal compass is really, really important for us to consider all of the guidance that we're getting from CSU, from funding agencies, from our journal and publishing agencies, and even our professional associations, if you are paying attention to if they have guidelines for codes of conduct or other things that would be helpful for you. All of that comes together for you to develop a sense of an internal compass on when it is that you're going to choose to use it and when it is you're going to choose not to use it. What is it useful for? What is it not useful for? The writing momentum techniques I'm going to be talking about are about human text generation. And there was a handout that went out to folks who attended the earlier webinar. This is a re-recording. So if you didn't get that handout, please just email us at csurights.colostate.edu and or at colostate.edu, and we'll be happy to send it to you. So when we talk about generating text, we're talking about something that Virginia Woolf had talked about as writing at a gallop. And writing at a gallop is an expression for her being able to outpace the editors in her head. So she was just writing just at a really good pace so that she could get the words down, but she didn't have to stop and think too critically about it. So she could just keep moving forward. That gallop also includes a place where horses' hooves leave the ground. Edward Muybridge proved this in the late 19th century, and showing that there's this kind of place where you're moving so quickly that you get air. And I think that's part of the flow feeling for how it is that we generate and then get into a state of just flow with our work. Patricia Goodson, she talks about how it is that we have a portion of our brain that is geared towards written text and generation, and another portion that is geared towards written text and editing. And when we try to combine both of those together, we can experience something like writer's block, or we get stalled out. And you can just think about how it feels when you are moving a text forward, when you're generating at a good pace. That feels good, that you're just one word right after the other. And then how it feels when you start to like delete, question, consider, sit there and pause for a while, right? Or just open up the document and sit there and you think about writing, and then you have deleted mentally what it is that you were going to be writing without having written anything at all. And so if we're combining both of those functions, they're separate portions of our brain. It's like switching on and off. It's a version of multitasking within a single act of writing. And so I love Goodson's description, right, of how it is that these are two separate areas, and that often we can be complaining of writer's block because we're attempting to generate and edit at the same time. So if that's something that resonates with you and it seems like something that you're doing regularly, maybe just helpful to separate those out a bit. And I've got some techniques for you to try out. One of them is Patricia Goodson's that I learned from her to see how it works. But first, let's just talk a little bit more about generative writing and drafting. And again, Virginia Woolf called it writing at a gallop. Patricia Goodson talks about it as a brain dump. Robert Boyce talked about it as spontaneous writing. So too did Peter Elbow and a number of others. This goes all the way back to Aristotle, the Greeks. I'm sure that, as long as we've had writing, we've had generative writing, where it's kind of like a brain dump. It's a first draft. It's a first thought. It's about getting into the flow, perhaps, of your ideas. But it can be, and particularly since we have all the great technologies of being able to erase sentences and paragraphs and sections all at once. We can create big messes and we can clean them up quickly. And we can, in that creating big messes, we can associate and make connections that maybe later on we will reassess how it is that those ideas are coming together. But in the moment of generating new content, we want to just keep it moving and make those associations. We might find that we make associations and connections that were before unthought of to ourselves. Like we're just, oh, hadn't realized that before. That's a great connection. It can be creative that way, and it's often productive, right? This is generating a lot. It's kind of messy though. Emma Darwin, she talks about how when we create that mess and we write that first draft, that we are writing for ourselves. When we clean it up, when we edit it, reorganize it, we're writing with our reader in mind. We're doing that so that they can read and understand. So that first draft, that first one, you may have heard the term shitty first draft from Anne Lamont's Bird by Bird book. And so we're just really kind of making a mess, and it's okay. That editing and revision process, more like the critic. It's slower. You're kind of looking carefully at the text. You're tidying things up. You're creating clarity. You're clearing things out so that they're concise. It's thoughtful. It's critical. It's kind of connecting ideas and it's organizing things. So we need to have the capacity to be able to do that process of editing and revision and cleaning up all in one go. Not that we're generating at the same time and editing at the same time, but that we're moving fluidly, perhaps between both of those. And so if you want to kind of separate out your generative from your editing, we've got some strategies for you to do that. But just note that we can also stall out by shifting if we accidentally move from critiquing the text and looking thoughtfully and critically at what's on the page to turning it towards ourselves. Sometimes that critical process turns, that lens turns inward. And if that happens during a writing session, you just want to be able to kind of acknowledge it, recognize that you are now in the place of criticizing you. Who are you to say these things? Why would you think that you could write this? All the stuff that happens, right? Then that inner critic, you drew me all wrong. Just reframe it so that just say, that's my critical lens, and I need to focus my critical lens back on that piece of writing, and that can then reorient your mind. We have other workshops and other places where we talk about that a little bit more, but if it's happening during an editing session or during the time that you're trying to generate content, it's just helpful to mark it, acknowledge it, and just know that critical lens needs to just reorient towards the text and what you're working on. You can train yourself to use that editorial function to your advantage ultimately. And here's an exercise of drafting quickly for a few minutes and then pausing and then editing slowly for a few minutes that will help with that. So set a timer for 5 minutes and draft out. Just work on what it is that you want to crank out and keep your fingers to the keyboard, pen to the page, however it is that you're drafting it out. You just want to keep it moving. And you know what it feels like when the horse's hooves leave the ground, right? Like, what does it feel like when you're continually moving that writing forward? If you start to get stuck, you can include sentence phrases like, I don't know what it is that I'm writing right here, right now, but I know that I'm going to get to the point soon. And what I really want to write is, you can build all that in. You can write all of that. You can type it. It keeps the flow going. And then you just trust and know that you're going to come back later and you will edit that out. And then you just take a breath here, just in a 5-minute session. Take a moment, catch your breath, and then go back and 5 minutes, edit it. Rearrange things that are out of order, take out word choices that don't work and replace them with words that are better, rephrase things, take out redundancies, take out the repetitions, right? So just edit slowly. Here's another technique that's great. It is actually part of, if you think about the Sprint and Write series, it's part of what we do. But you might want to think about what it is that you're bringing into those timed sessions, but it requires a timer and it requires some deep work and intensive mental work being done. So let's talk about that. It comes from Cal Newport's deep work, and In it, he talks about any number of strategies and ways that we can limit distractions for us to be able to be productive knowledge workers. And he's got some really, really great helpful techniques. Also, just as a reminder of like, we are not only workers, that we have full, rich lives. And what we want to do is put some containments on our work so that we can have leisure and other activities as well. And so that's where he draws from Teddy Roosevelt, who, as an undergraduate, published a book which was not related to his coursework, not related to his studies at all. It wasn't formal, but it was on the birds of the Adirondacks. And it was based on the things that he did in his leisure time. And he apparently was a good student, not a genius student, but that's because he had lots of extracurricular activities. He was a bird watcher, a boxer, a wrestler, bodybuilder, dancing, poetry readings, so on and on. He had all of these other interests that were not necessarily part of his coursework, and he didn't want to spend all of his time doing, studies. So he scheduled in enough time for him to be able to complete his coursework and do well. And so he had these highly focused study sessions. And what he would do is set a timer and set the timer for less time than he thought that he needed. I think he's just looking at a watch, but we set timers. And then worked to that and got it done so he could go off and do other things. Cal Newport took that and kind of created a version of a Rooseveltian dash, right? So where you select a task that you're going to be working on that you have to get done that's a high priority. So there's a little bit of interest and kind of a little bit of pressure, external pressure maybe on it. And then estimate how long that task is going to take. If you think it's going to take an hour, and then you want to set a deadline that reduces that time. So maybe 45 minutes, really radical, half an hour, but thinking about that dash, how realistic is it? And then you set that timer and you work to the timer. And the goal is to beat the timer if you can. So maybe 45 minutes, right? So see if you can beat that buzzer. Newport says that if you're doing deep work tasks this way, that they are cognitively draining. And what you want to do is do them and build skill or capacity to do that. So do one once a week and then maybe a couple times a week. This is not an everyday practice. Think about sprinters and they're, high-level sprinters, they're sprinting and training. Very few of us are sprinting around campus. Well, maybe a little, depends on who you are. But think about the training that you need to do in order to sprint well, the stretching, the preparation, all those things, and then how exhausted or how tired you are after a sprint. So you need to rest and you need to recover. The same thing with your cognitive work and work that's demanding. Newport notes that what dashes do is that they leverage artificial deadlines to help us systematically increase the level that we can regularly achieve, and that the dashes are incompatible with distraction. That's one of his keys in deep work, is that we want to be working in places that are just distraction-free. So we're limiting the external distractions, the pings from the outside world, the email and other things that come in and kind of draw on our energies. And to the extent that you're a daydreamer or you get lost in thought, right? For what rumination, whatever that is, trying to limit those internal distractions, I would add as well. But I think writing at speed and then kind of sprinting, right? It takes strategies and regular practice. It allows for us to access our generative mind. It allows for us also to recognize the value of having a critical mind. We practice being able to talk back to critical edges and kind of those editors in our head. And I think sometimes it feels, just as a caveat, you might be going a little bit slower if you're paying attention to your strategies than you feel like you are. You might feel like your progress is a little bit less. But if you look at what you can generate in 5 minutes of just quickly dumping out, brain dumping, and then going back and cleaning it up, you might be surprised what 10 minutes allows for you to do. So preparing to sprint. This is a lot, what do you have to have cognitively at session in order for you just to write, just to write? We often come to writing sessions and find ourselves not writing as much as we would like or feeling like the writing session wasn't good, in part because we weren't prepared to write. So writing has our writing sessions at CSU Writes. You can include anything that you want. You can bring to retreats, reading or creating figures or any other thing, data analysis. And what those steps do is they're preparing you to be able to have the generative moments, those generative sessions. If you are not feeling like you're able to write on something, chances are you just need to step back a little bit, spend some writing sessions, then preparing, right? And by prepping your content, understanding what methods you want to describe, what the findings are that you want to describe, what are your analyses and points you want to make, all before starting that sprint. During a sprint, it's important for us to avoid the rabbit holes that academics are prone to go down. We love following that little bit of information that takes us from one idea to the next. Just mark the impulse and move forward. During a sprinting session or a writing session, try to keep those fingers to the keyboard. As I mentioned, keep the pace, keep moving forward, pen to the page. If you can, avoid the delete button. This one has been controversial and of great conversation in our sprints of the past, because it's amazing how enamored we are with our delete buttons without realizing it. So we start doing the practice sessions of practicing 5 minutes of generative content and then 5 minutes of editing. Just mark how often you're tempted to hit that delete button during the generative portion of that. If you're generating, it's a generative session, avoid, right, editing. Trust that post-sprint, you're going to be able to go and rearrange, revise, and add to your article as needed. Adhere to the sprint timeline. So in the dash, for example, if you're setting a timer, you need to stop when that timer goes off. You're out of time. Follow the sprint session lead. It's the only way that the structure of it works. And it's important for your mind also to know, when do you start and when do you stop? And it's so very easy for the type of work that we do for it to bleed over kind of boundaryless throughout our day. And if you're writing at great intensity and you want to have content generated at a certain point in time, adhering to the sprint timeline is really helpful. Adding bibliography, citations, footnotes, post-sprint, that's also really, really helpful, knowing that you don't have to include them at the moment when you're generating content. You can go back and you can identify that source and put it in. A lot of people put brackets, right? They're like cite bracket, citation bracket, or look for source. Think the source is, right? So just include that and keep moving forward. I also think that this type of work requires relational awareness, and it's essential, I think, to our being able to do it well and healthfully. Otherwise, we're treating ourselves like machines that we just push, 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 and that's not what these sessions are about, right? They're time bound. They have a start and a stop, right? But it's important for us to be aware of what our bodies need, what we mentally need in order to be able to do this work. So we need to take breaks and breaths as needed. I had a portion of my graduate work where I was getting these terrible headaches, and it turned out that I was just holding my breath from the start of a sentence until I finished the sentence, and then I would take a breath. And then I'd start another sentence, and I'd hold my breath, and then I would take a breath. And my advisor was like, you got to breathe. So it made my writing better too by breathing, just saying. But take the assigned writing breaks. Right. This is for our sprint sessions, but take them as scheduled. Those 5 minutes mean a lot. When you're doing the write at speed, practice non-judgmental kind of writing generation where you're not actively critiquing what it is that you're writing as you're writing it, but you're allowing it to flow, knowing that you can come back and then add in and critique later. Practicing mindful awareness of your own body and breath, super helpful. And celebrating with others, going to lunch, saying, this was a great day of incremental work that I generated out. And then acknowledge and expressing gratitude for the collegial support that we have. And CSU is a great community, and I'm ever grateful to be able to have writers who can write alongside me and I can write alongside with. All right, so workshop preparation, or that sprint preparation, for those of you who are doing those sprints, here's some tips. Identify the journals where you want to submit. That way you can prepare and kind of think about the the nature and kind of style in which you're going to be writing. What's the structure? What's the typical length of an article? How are they put together? So you can just look at some model articles, reverse outline them if you want, meaning that you kind of pull them apart and analyze them for their structure, not for their content, but how it is that they're put together. So your mind can be aware of what you're asking it to do. What style are you asking it to write in? What format are you asking it to engage with? Analyze your data so that you have a sense of what you're saying about it before you get there, before you sit down at the session. Preparing tables and figures and illustrations goes along with that. Reading the relevant literature, particularly if you're writing a literature review, you want to be able to be pretty facile in how it is that you connect between ideas and be able to bring in sources. Identify key quotations if you're using quotations. I'm in a quotation heavy field in literary studies and writing studies. So we want to be able to pull what it is that we are working with and the connections we're making and the analyses we're making. And then thinking about what sections or subsections you're going to want to generate is really helpful. Like what's in the first session, what's in the second session that you might be working on. Data, visuals, concepts, ideas for each of those sections. Make sure that you have those kind of clearly maybe outlined or identified so that you aren't stumbling to find them while you're generating content. You want to have all of that kind of prepped. You want to make it easy for you to be able to write from one idea to the next as you're there. That building the right for speed kind of endurance by practicing 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, super helpful. And that's because this is what our timeline looks like in a 2-hour block. So in September, on September 25th and October 2nd, we'll have an early bird start. We'll do a quick welcome, remind us what it is that we're doing and the structure and the timeline that we're following. And then I or Kimmy from CSU Writes will be the timekeepers and the leads on this. And we write for 25 minutes and then we wrap and we kind of take a break, a breath, and maybe look at what we're going to be working on for the next 25 minutes. And we practice that for 4 sessions, 4 sprints in a row. So we do 4 sprints within 2 hours, and then we wrap the session, acknowledge, right, and recognize the work that we've done, and then maybe break for lunch or go someplace. All right. Show Up and Write has additional kind of resources that can work with the Sprint and Write series. And Show Up and Write are drop-in writing sessions where you don't actually have to have anything prepped. There's no pressure, just progress. So these are regular sessions where we have lead writers who volunteer to show up in rooms on campus, often in the Walnut Building, sometimes in Eddy. And then virtually, there are a number of writers who are in other states who are working with CSU virtually. They're either online graduate students or faculty or staff who are in extension, for example, who may be elsewhere. And they volunteer their time to come and sit in a virtual room or in a physical room to hold a space for writing and for you to show up. And so they're really looking forward to writing with you. And if you are looking forward to producing a fair amount over the semester and would like some additional accountability, that's a great opportunity for you to sign up for a session. We have some available. Not all of these are available at this moment. I think a couple of them have been filled. But if you go to the CSU Writes website and look on Show Up and Write page, on the Show Up and Write page, you should be able to find a link to sessions where you can sign up and we can get you set up with a room and a space and so you can hold a space for writing and get your work done regularly over the semester. So I look forward to working with you and seeing you at various sessions over the course of this semester. Sprint and Write, it's a great series. I hope you're able to participate, and I look forward to talking with you when you do. Take care.